Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. Today we are doing the second class in a series about the cycles of seven and Shabbat. In our first class, we looked at the number seven in a very, very general way, looking at the sources in the Torah, especially the seventh day of creation, and discussed seven different cycles of seven relating to time, seven in days, Shabbat, seven in weeks, counting the Omer, seven in months, the three pilgrimage holidays, the 7 years cycle that are 6 years of work, and the Shemitah year, the sabbatical year, and then 7 times 7 years, and the 50th Jubilee year, and then 6,000 years of history, and the 7th Messianic era, and then the symbolic idea of 49,000 Jubilee years in the world to come. So that was just a review of 7 different cycles of time in groups of 7, based on the first time that 7 appears in the Torah is the first Shabbat of creation. Excuse me. Today, we are going to do an overview of the many times that the number 7 appears in Jewish law, in Jewish custom, Jewish text, and Jewish rituals. And we probably will not get through all of them. There are so many, but as many as we can, we're going to go through today. And I've grouped them more or less in, I'll go through the holidays and show the many times that the number 7 appears in our observance and celebration of holidays. Then we're going to look at different cycles as pertained to Jewish law and custom. Then we're going to look at different physical objects or people or entities that are grouped in 7s. And finally, we'll look at 2 different structures of mitzvot that are based around the number 7. And as I said, we are probably leaving out some, if not many more. But these are a lot of the major ones. So we're going to start with the holidays, and we will start with Shabbat. And the rest of the series will be dedicated mostly to learning about Shabbat. So Shabbat, of course, is the 7th day. And in fact, in the Torah, we saw it in the first Shabbat of creation, when God rested from all of the work. And I should mention before we go on that 3 of the cycles of 7 relating to time are based on 6 and 1, equaling the 7. 6 days we work, and the 7th day we rest. 6 years we work our fields, and the 7th we rest. And history will play itself out in a cycle of 6,000 years and will culminate in the Messianic era in the 7th. So we see a 6 and a 1. So we refer to Shabbat 2 different ways, either Yom HaShvi'i, the 7th day, and in fact, in the Shabbat of creation, the word Shabbat is not used for calling the day, but it's more a verb that God rested from the work that he did. Shabbat is based on the word shev, to sit, to rest, to refrain from work. And many times in the Torah, it's referred to as Yom HaShvi'i, the seventh day. So there are two ways we refer to Shabbat. So what is the difference? So one is that Shabbat is the culmination of a week. In other words, we work for 6 days and then we rest on Shabbat. So it's called the seventh day because it's the completion, it's the finishing of the cycle of a week. Shabbat, we're told in the Zohar that the blessing for the coming week all comes from Shabbat. So even though we count the days starting with, we'll call it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or in the language of the Torah, Yom Rishon Shel Shabbat, the first day of the week. Yom Sheni LeShabbat, the second day of the week. So all of the blessing for the coming week is coming from Shabbat. So here we see what's said in the Sefer Yetzirah, that the end is wedged in the beginning, and the beginning in the end. Na'ud sofan b'techilatan, b'techilatan b'sofan. So Shabbat is both the end of a week, and in a sense, it's the beginning of the next week, because all the blessing comes from it. So here we see Shabbat is actually referred to as the seventh day. On Shabbat, we read the Torah publicly. And the way that we read it is we divide it into calling 7 men up to the Torah, and they say blessings before and after. In other words, the Torah portion is divided into 7 what are called aliyot. 7 people are called up. And then there's a maftir, an 8th person is called up as a lead in to the Haftorah that will be read afterwards. So here we see the number 7 again, that in theory, the readings could have been divided into any number of divisions, but specifically it's divided into 7. In fact, we finished the portion in 7, and the maftir goes back, the additional person goes back and reads a little bit from the last reading, the 7th reading. Also, the main prayer in Judaism in general is called the Amidah, the standing prayer, or the silent prayer, sometimes referred to. And during the week, the Amidah has 19 blessings. Originally, it had 18. And that's why to this day, we still call it the Shmona Esrei, the prayer of 18. But a 19th was added later. And that's during the week. But on Shabbat and holidays, we only have 7 blessings. In other words, because it's Shabbat, because it's the 7th day, so the Amidah has only 7 blessings. There are 3 in the beginning and 3 in the end, which are standard for all Amidah prayers, no matter when they're said. But in the middle, instead of 12 or 13 requests, as we do during the week, we only have 1 request. And it's not even a request, it's more of a statement that God is Mekadesh HaShabbat. God sanctifies the Shabbat. So here again, the sages, knowing the importance of the number 7, made it that every Shabbat and holiday has 7. One exception is on Musaf of Rosh Hashanah. there are 9 blessings altogether. So that was about Shabbat and the number 7. Then we see of the 3 pilgrimage holidays, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So Pesach has 7 days, and Sukkot has 7 days. Now in the diaspora, there are an additional 8th day. But in Eretz Yisrael, which is the central focus, there are only 7 days of Pesach and 7 days of Sukkot. Interestingly enough, Shavuot is celebrated on the 6th of Sivan. The 6th day of Sivan, though there's a disagreement in the Gemara, when the Torah was actually given, was it given on the 6th day or the 7th day? Even though we celebrated for all generations on the 6th day, there is a idea that Moshe added 1 day in the preparation for receiving the Torah. So this is a disagreement in the Torah. Rashi seems to side with the idea that Moshe indeed did add an extra day, and many commentaries accept that. But here again, we see, as we discussed in the first class, the connection between 6 and 7. We looked at that in relationship to the menorah and the Magen David, where you have 6, but with a central shaft in the middle, or a central area of the Magen David. So here we see, in the sense, all 3 of the holidays are connected to 7, even though today we do Shavuos on the 6th day. Along with that, now we see that the 7th day of both Pesach and Sukkot are special days. In fact, on Pesach, the 7th day of Pesach is a holiday in of itself. The 7th day of Pesach is when we cross the Red Sea. In Sukkot, the 7th day is also special. It's not a holiday in of itself, but it's called Hoshana Rabbah. And that is based very, very much on 7s. I'll get back to that in one minute. On Sukkot, the number 7 appears even more times. Very, very significant that during the 7 days of Sukkot, we invite what are called the Ushpizin, the special guests. Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. These are called the special shepherds, the guests, the Ushpizin. And each day of Sukkot is dedicated to remembering and honoring each one of these shepherds or Ushpizin. So the first day of Sukkot is Avram, the second day is Yitzchak, and so forth. Further, the 7 Ushpizin relate to the 7 lower Sfirot. So the first day of Sukkot is Avram, but it's also the aspect of Chesed. And the second day is Yitzchak, and the aspect of Gevura, and continuing like that. So even more 7s. When we take the Arba meaning, the 4 species of Sukkot, and we wave them, we shake them. This is the very special mitzvah of Sukkot. Even though we call it the Arba meaning, the 4 types, there are actually 7 of them. Why? There is 1 lulav and 1 etrog, but there are 3 hadas, and there are 2 aravot. Aravot are the willows, hadas is the myrtle. So it's 3, 2, 1, and 1 equals 7. We're actually taking 7 species, even though there are only 4 types, and we're shaking them. And when we shake them to the 6 directions. If you remember in the first class, we discussed the idea of the 6 vortexes of space and the inner vortex of time or consciousness. So when we shake the lulav, we shake it in each direction and we shake it out, but then we draw it in. And we showed a cube. that all of space is envisioned as a cube. A cube is six-sided, and it represents the four cardinal directions and above and below. But each time we draw it in, that's the seventh. And that's, in a sense, the most important one, because that's our consciousness. So here we see seven over and over again, the Ushpizim, the four special species, the way that we shake lulav. And then when we get to Hoshana Rabbah, the number seven is prevalent again, because, and here I'm going to jump ahead to one of the historical events with the number seven, is on Hoshana Rabbah, every day except Shabbat, we, in the synagogue, but it's based on what would happen in the temple. In the temple, people would go around the altar holding their arba minim one time. A big, huge procession of people around the altar one time. And then on Hoshana Rabbah, the seventh day of Sukkot, we go around seven times. We go around seven times. So again, the number seven, Hoshana Rabbah, of course, is the seventh day. But this is based in great measure on the historical event of what happened in Jericho, when the Jewish people first entered into Eretz Yisrael, and we had to conquer the land. And so the first place they conquered was Jericho, and God commanded Joshua to surround the city of Jericho, which was a walled city, one time each day. And the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark, went with them. And there were seven Kohanim, seven priests who had seven shofars. And each day they would blow the shofar as they went around one time. And then God commanded Joshua, on the seventh day to go around seven times, and again with the seven Kohanim and the seven shofarot. But the difference is, on the seventh day, when the Kohanim blew the shofars, all the people also had shofars, and they joined in, and the sound of all of the shofars together, it says that the walls fell down. They fell down, and Israel then conquered Jericho. So this historical event is translated into the ritual of Hoshana Rabbah. And the message behind it is, we're getting to the end of the holidays. It's the seventh day of Sukkot. All that remains is Shmini Atzeret and Simchas Torah. And we're told at the end of Hoshana Rabbah, when we hit the willows 5 times on the ground, this is the final sealing. The first sealing of the judgment is at Ne'ilah time in Yom Kippur. And then the last one is on Hoshana Rabbah. And the significance of the 5 willows is that Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur is the 5th service, the only time of the year that we have 5 prayer services on one day. And that is the initial sealing of the judgment for the coming year. But it's totally sealed on Hoshana Rabbah with the 5 willows, which are connecting the 5th prayer of Yom Kippur to Hoshana Rabbah. So here we see the number 7 with Sukkot and Hoshana Rabbah over and over again. Then on Simchas Torah, again, we do 7 hakafot, 7 circuits of the synagogue at night and in the day. So here we see the number 7 over and over again in the holidays. Now there's even more, because we have Sfirat HaOmer. That's not a holiday, but Sfirat HaOmer connects Pesach to Shavuot, where we count seven weeks times 7 days, 49 days. And this is what connects Pesach to Shavuot, this counting of 7 weeks, as discussed in our first class. Now, on Rosh Hashanah, before we blow the shofar, it's a custom from the Arizal that we say the 47th Psalm 7 times. And in most congregations, we do this. And in this psalm, the idea of blowing the shofar is mentioned. That's why it's chosen. And we say it 7 times. And many people have the kavanah. Each time we say it, the first time is to fix chesed. The second time is to fix gevura and tiferet, and the 7 lower sfirot. Another connection with 7 as regards Yom Kippur is that the time period of what's called the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of repentance, are beginning with Rosh Hashanah and ending with Yom Kippur. These are the 10 days. Rosh Hashanah is 2 days, and Yom Kippur is 1 day. And therefore, there's 7 days in between. So this is another very important cycle of 7, because during those 7 days, we are continuing the tshuva process. And at the time of the temple, the Kohen Gadol was separated and was in the temple reviewing and practicing and going over the avoda that he would do on Yom Kippur. So that was a cycle of 7 within the 10 days of tshuva. Now there's another one with Yom Kippur, a very interesting one. In Musaf of Yom Kippur, we review and we actually follow the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, as he goes through his service. This is a very, very deep and profound part of Musaf and Yom Kippur. We're like visualizing and being with the Kohen Gadol as he goes through the service in the temple. And part of that is that when the Kohen Gadol would say the Shema Mefarash, the ineffable name of God, everyone would fall on their faces in the temple. And even today, during Musaf, it's one of the only times we do that is once on Rosh Hashanah and a few times in Yom Kippur, where we actually get down on our hands and knees and bow like we did at the time of the temple. It's a very emotional, potent, energetic action, this bowing down. As part of Musaf, though, in the temple, Aaron took the blood from the sacrifices and ritually, symbolically purified the different elements in the temple. And we say it in our prayers, it's discussed, well, how did he sprinkle? In English, he sprinkled the blood. So the way we say it is he sprinkled once above and like 7 below. And so we say, achat bi'achat, achat v'shtayim, achat v'shalosh, achat v'arba, achat v'chamesh, achat v'shesh, achat v'sheva. So in other words, the sprinkling happened in a series of 7 sprinkles. We're going to get back to this idea of purification with the number 7 when we discuss cycles in rituals. And then one more idea connected to Yom Kippur. We already mentioned Ne'ilah is the final fifth prayer of Yom Kippur. It's full of passion and longing because the prayers are almost over. We're getting in our last prayers. At the end of Ne'ilah, this is probably the apex of the experience of Yom Kippur in many ways, is the one leading the prayers usually yells out with their full voice, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And everyone repeats it one time. And then everyone yells, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Blessed is the name of God, the glory of the name of God forever and ever. We say that 3 times. And then it culminates, Hashem Hu HaElokim. These 2 names of God that represent in a certain way Chesed and Gevurah, which represents all of the polarities of the world in a way. And we yell it out 7 times. Hashem Hu HaElokim. Hashem Hu Elokim. That's the end of Yom Kippur. Then it's Kaddish, and at the end, the shofar is blown. And that is the end of Yom Kippur. So here again, the number 7. So these were many, if not most, of the number 7s as they apply to the different holidays and Shabbat. I'm sure there are a few more that we left out. Now we're going to go to different cycles as far as ritual and especially purification. So the main one is, and it's still practiced till today, is what's called the laws of family purity. These are very, very important. The whole home is based on it, the relationship between husband and wife. And these are called the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha, the laws of purification of the family. And these surround the intimate relations between a husband and a wife, where when a woman menstruates, then husband and wife separate. And they separate for 5 days until the blood stops flowing. And it's usually 5 days. There could be exceptions, but usually it's around 5 days. And then begins a 7-day period called the clean days, where a woman is not bleeding anymore. And 7 clean days are counted. And when they're completed, a woman goes to the mikvah, and husband and wife are reunited in marital unity. This is the basis of family life, lifestyle, an observant lifestyle. For those people looking from the outside, it's like it's crazy. What is this? It has so much emotional and psychological sense to it. And anyone who has lived this kind of lifestyle knows that every mikvah night is like wedding night. And what happens so often in the secular world is that the excitement of sexuality wears off at a certain point. And that's why it's so prevalent of men who are married looking for other women, and in our day, women looking for other men. And the divorce rate, not for only this reason, but is sky high in societies around the world. And the laws of family purity ensure that the sexual attraction stays ever new, but it's done through separation and then coming back together. All of this was just to describe that the 7 clean days in between is an important cycle within the cycle of usually the 12 days of separation. Now, in the Torah itself, there are a number of different issues, not meaning ideas, but when different pus or blood or other bodily fluids come out of the body because of different ailments, different skin diseases, different flows. And in all of those cases, a person has to go through a 7-day period of purification, and then also go to the mikvah in order to be cleansed. So here we see the cycle. Here we call it purity and impurity. Ritually, we're not talking about clean and dirty. We're talking about ritual cleanliness is happening through cycles of 7. Now, we will continue with this idea of rituals having a cycle of 7. And this is especially with the wedding, a Jewish wedding, where the number 7 appears over and over again. Now, most of what we've talked about up to now is Torah mandated. Some of the ways that we do the prayers of the holidays today in Shabbat, that is coming from the rabbis. But the fact that Pesach is 7 days, that's from the Torah. Sukkot is 7 days, that's from the Torah. And then the rabbis took the number 7 and they added to the rituals. So the wedding ritual is also created by the rabbis, but based on the number 7. Where do we see this? So first of all, there is a custom. Not everyone does this, but it's a custom that 7 days before the wedding, the chatan and kala, the groom and the bride, don't see each other. And this is at a very practical level, so there'll be no fighting because there's so many details that go into a wedding. Sometimes there's a lot of stress about the details. And so chatan and kala is like, no, that's for someone else to deal with. We have to prepare ourselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually for being married. So there's like a 7-day separation. And then at the wedding ceremony, so actually Sephardim don't do this ritual. Again, it's a custom, but in Ashkenazic circles, it's a play on words. The bride, when she comes to the chuppah, when she comes to the wedding canopy, the chatan is already there, and she goes around 7 times. She surrounds him 7 times. So again, this has so much symbolism. It's connected to all of these 7s on so many different levels. We could spend a whole class with the intentions of the bride when she goes around 7 times. We obviously don't have time for that tonight. And then under the wedding canopy, the end of the ceremony is the recitation of 7 blessings. And these 7 blessings are very, very special. And then the whole wedding celebration continues for 7 days. And during those 7 days, it's based around having a meal where these same 7 blessings are repeated again. So here again, we see the number 7 chosen by the rabbis because 7 represents a whole cycle, and it's Torah mandated. That's what we learned in the first class, that the importance of the number 7 is that it's a cycle that God created, especially in time, for us to follow. But we see that the number 7, even in the Torah, is mandated for many, many different things. Also, when a person has what's called sara'at, the skin disease that's discussed in 2 parshas in the book of Leviticus, Tazria and Mitzorah, when the person who has this skin ailment, he has to go out of the camp for 7 days. And then when they are ready to be cleansed, they go through another 7-day purification process. So here we see in the laws of becoming pure again ritually, and in all of the customs of a wedding, we see the number 7 over and over again. Okay, now we will go to different entities, objects, and people that are grouped in 7s. So first of all, one that we discussed in our first class, and I won't go back into it, but the menorah in the temple was a 7-branched candelabrum. And as we discussed, it's 1 central shaft and then 3 on either side. So again, you have the 6 plus 1 equaling the 7. So that we learned was, to this day, it's the actual symbol of the state of Israel, is a menorah. And for thousands of years, that was the symbol. And we learned last week, in a way, that Magen David, the Star of David, has not replaced it, but in a way surpassed it in people's identity with a symbol for Judaism. But we learned that also it was based on 6 triangles formed by the 2 triangles, one going up and one coming down, and then the middle space. So it's also the 6 and the 1. Then in the world, there are many things that are categorized in groups of 7. And these are given over many times in the Talmud. And we have this concept of 7 heavens, a concept of 7 hells, Gehenna, the idea of 7 seas. Even today, we talk about the 7 major seas, the 7 major continents. So in the physical, we have the number 7 over and over again. If we have time, I'll go back over these 7 heavens a little bit. But I want to get through all of these as much as possible in one class, so we can go on to Shabbat in the next class. Then we already mentioned the 7 shepherds, the 7 ushpizing, Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. This relates to Sukkot, and it relates to the 7 lower sfirot. Then, just in the stories of the Torah, we have the very, very important story of when Pharaoh has a dream, and he dreams of 7 skinny cows and 7 plump cows. And the skinny ones consumed the fat ones, and 7 stalks of wheat that were sickly, and 7 healthy ones, but the sickly ones consumed the healthy ones. And of course, Yosef interpreted this as 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. So we see in this story the number 7 is crucial. And this is how Yosef rises to power, and then he brings down his family, and the whole story kind of plays itself out based on Yosef interpreting this dream. Then in ancient days, before they knew about Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, the ancients, including in the Gemara, talk about a system of 7 planets: the sun, the moon, and Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and what am I leaving out? Or maybe I just got all of them. I lost track. But the 7 stars, the 7 planets, we're also told about that in the Gemara, they count 48 male prophets and 7 female prophets. So again, we have this grouping of 7. Then we have the 7 fruits of Israel, the 7 special fruits. And we even say special blessings after we eat a fruit in a certain quantity. It has a special blessing because they're the special fruits of Eretz Yisrael. It's all learned from one verse. It's a land of wheat and barley and grapes and figs and pomegranates, olive and date. It's all in one verse. Eretz chita v'sara v'gefen v'te'ena v'rimon. Eretz zeit shemen v'devash. So these are the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael. And also it's given over, especially in the Sefer Yetzirah, which has many groupings of 7, the 7 days of the week, and the 7 portals of the senses, where we have the 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, and a mouth. So there's 7 what are called the gates of perception. The gates of the senses are coming through the face. That's 4 of them. The other one is touch, that we usually think of with the hands. But what are called the gates of perception, of sight and hearing and tasting and smelling, are coming through the 7 portals of the face. And now I want to get to the last category, is that we have 2 sets of mitzvot that are given over. One is called the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach. These are the 7 universal laws of the children of Noach that were in place, and according to us are still in place for all of humanity. When we received the Torah, so we received another 613 mitzvot. So, but the 7 mitzvot b'nai Noach still apply to the world. And would it be that the whole world would recognize this and live by it? So Rav Ginsburg, and I'll do this quickly, associated them with the 7 lower sfirot, and that each one of these mitzvot is connected to one of these sfirot and is a fixing in a way. Again, we don't have the time to delve into it deeply, but I'm just going to mention that the 7 mitzvot are, and this is naturally the order, but in the order of the Sefirot is no adultery. This is connected to Chesed. Chesed is love. And so this is the fixing of love, is that relationships should be permitted relationships. The second one is Gevura. The second of the 7 mitzvot is one should not murder. And Gevura, because it's strength and judgment. And when this aspect is taken into its negative, it could end up with murder, God forbid. So the mitzvah of not to murder is connected to Gevura. No theft, no stealing. You'll notice that these are part of the 10 commandments. So theft is connected to Tiferet. Tiferet is beauty. And so what's the motivation for stealing? Someone sees that someone else has something that they want. It's like it draws them. This object draws them because they want that beauty in their life. So the no stealing is a fixing for honoring other people's possessions and what they consider beautiful. Then Netzach is victory. And this applies to the mitzvah of no idolatry, no idol worship. So because Netzach means victory, so much of Jewish history played itself out in trying to teach the world not to worship idols, the idea of one God. It's still the same mission today. Idol worship has taken on many different forms. But Avram initially came to teach the whole world, which was steeped in idol worship, about the concept of one God. And so Netzach is connected to the mitzvah of no idol worship. The next sphere is Hod, and this is the mitzvah of not blaspheming God. In other words, to have respect and awe for God, that one would not think, chas v'sholom, of cursing God. And Hod is connected to praising God. So blaspheming God is the opposite. So it's a fixing in the aspect of Hod. In Yesod, of foundation, so this is the mitzvah of not eating a live limb from an animal. It actually was a custom in the old days to sometimes take a live limb from an animal. Now, obviously, there's an extension of no cruelty to animals at all, and this symbolizes it. And that's connected to Yesod, the energy of Yesod. And the last one is, and I should mention, the first 6 that we mentioned are all turned in the negative. No adultery, no murder, no stealing, no idolatry, no blasphemy, and no eating a live limb from an animal. The only one that is phrased in the positive, even though the opposite of each one of them in the positive also applies. But here, the only one that's termed in the positive is setting up courts of law to rule a society justly, and especially to rule on these 6 laws and all of their extensions. All of the discussion of the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 laws of the children of Noach, there are actually many, many mitzvot that are connected to them. It's not just 7. There are many, many ones that are connected on many different levels to these 7. Now we'll go to a grouping of 7 mitzvot from the rabbis, that the rabbis established 7 mitzvot that have the power of a Torah commandment. And in 6 of the 7, we see that because the blessing is the usual, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, but then it adds, Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, that you have commanded, that you have made us holy through the commandments. And that we usually keep only for a Torah-mandated mitzvah. But the rabbis added 7 mitzvot, that 6 of them we say mitzvah as if God commanded them, commanded us. And the 7th one just has the first part of the blessing. We'll go through it quickly. And we're told that there's an acronym, and that is Na B'Simcha. Na here means with an ayin, means to travel, to journey, to move with joy. B'Simcha. So what are these mitzvot? So the nun of Na B'Simcha is Netila Yadayim. It does not say in the Torah anywhere about washing hands, even though it mentions about the Kohanim in the temple had to wash their hands and feet before they entered into the Torah, into the temple. From that, we take it upon ourselves. The first thing in the morning, we wash Netila Yadayim, and especially over bread. When we eat bread, we wash hands and we say a blessing. The ayin is eruv, the idea of creating a space in which people can carry on Shabbat. Because from the Torah, you can't carry from a public domain to a private domain or a private domain to a public domain unless you have an eruv. And an eruv in our day is usually made up of a series of poles with a string attached that creates a space as if everyone is in ownership of this space, and therefore it's not called a public area anymore because it's shared and we could carry. In modern cities today, in almost all modern cities where there is a high concentration of Jews, Jews have received permission from the cities to make an eruv, and usually it's connected to telephone poles. That becomes the eruv, but you have to do special things to make it, not just telephone poles, and that's not for our discussion right now. So that's the ayin of Na B'Simcha. The shin is lighting candles on Shabbat. Doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that we have to light candles on Shabbat, but the rabbis added this, and we say the bracha as if Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivana, you have commanded us lighting candles on Shabbat. The mem of Simcha is Megillah. When we read the Megillah, the Megillah comes a full 1,000 years after the Torah was given. Yet we say the bracha as if God was commanding us to say it. The chet is the same thing with Hanukkah. When we light the lights of Hanukkah, we say Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. And when we say Hallel, the special grouping of psalms that we say on holidays. So those are the 7. These two are connected in a way because we're told a very beautiful thing on the first luchot. There were 620 letters. The first 2 tablets had the 10 commandments, and the 10 commandments have 620 letters. 620 equals keter, crown. This is as if God is giving us access to the crown of God. Through doing the mitzvot, we are connected to the highest level of God. Now, what's interesting is the 620 letters equals Keter. Now, we have 613 mitzvot. So there's two versions of how do we get to 620. One is these 7 mitzvot from the rabbis, 613 Torah mandated, plus the 7 from the rabbis equals 620. And the other version is the 613 mitzvot and the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. So that completes the 7s. And I said I would try to go back. I'm going to do this quickly. The 7 heavens. For anyone who wants to look this up, this is in the tractate of Chagiga, the 12th page, and the second part of the page, 12b. Begins this, and it's a fairly long discussion about the names of the 7 heavens and what happens. Now, this is very symbolic, and most of them are very, very understandable. There's one that is very enigmatic, and I'll just mention that Rav Ginsburg had a whole series many, many, many years ago on the 7 heavens, and he explains that each one of them is a different type of Jewish meditation, meditating on different concepts or ideas or letters and worlds, and each one is a different meditation. We don't have the time to go into that right now, but I'm just going to mention the names of the 7, and according to the Gemara, what happens in these heavens, and all of them are based on verses. Now, each one is based on verses that are brought where many times the names of these heavens are mentioned in a verse. So the first one is called Vilon, sometimes called a curtain. And this we could relate to as the lower atmosphere. And we're told that this is the lowest of the heavens. And we're told that this is where God renews the work of creation every single day. It means that this is where it's manifest, because this is where human consciousness dwells, is on the earth, in the closest proximity to the lowest heaven. And so God is renewing the works of creation every day. The second one is called Rakia, firmament, like it's mentioned on the 2nd and the 4th day of creation, the idea of a firmament. And here the Talmud says this is where the sun and the moon and all of the planets and all of the stars, that's what's called the 2nd heaven. The third one is called Shechachim, and this is where blessings are stored and dispensed with. I can't remember if it's in the Fruits of the Orchard class or this class where we talked about that the word for blessing, bracha, comes from the idea of brecha, a holding tank of water or a pool of water. A swimming pool is called brechat schiyah in Hebrew, a swimming pool, a pool of water. And that when we say a bracha, we're drawing down blessings from this holding pool into our world. So this third heaven is where these blessings are contained. The fourth one is called Zavul. And again, all these are based on verses that would take a long time to discuss, but anyone can look it up in Chagiga 12b. In Zavul is the idea of the heavenly Jerusalem, and where the angels especially Michael, acts as the high priest, and it is parallel to the lower Jerusalem. This is a whole concept that everything in the lower world is a reflection, a mirror image of things that are happening in these heavens in the upper worlds. So that is Zevul. Then there is Ma'on. In Ma'on, this is where the angels are singing to God. And in the Talmud, they make a point that they sing at night, and they actually bring a verse to prove this. They don't sing during the day because this is when Israel is singing praises to God. This is an opinion of the angels singing only at night. But this heaven is made of angels singing. Now the next one is Machon, and this is the sixth one. This is the most enigmatic one. Here is where there's a storehouse of tribulations meant for people who deserve them. Now, this is a bit enigmatic because when we would think, well, this should be one of the hells. Why is this called a heaven? And there's a discussion in the Gemara because it's not easy to understand. So one of the ideas brought forth is that David actually prayed that these tribulations should not be in heaven, but should be on earth. And his reasoning was based on a verse that there is no evil with God. And this is actually a very important idea, especially when we're trying to deal with good and evil in this world and why bad things happen to good people. One of the most challenging ideas for all people, and certainly in Judaism. And so we basically have the concept that no evil comes from God, but that God, in order for there to be free choice, makes a place where evil can occur, but it's like one removed. It's not coming directly from God. And that's what David prayed to God. He says, there should be no evil in your place. Heaven is your place, is your dwelling. Of course, we want to draw God to dwell on the earth, to bring heaven down to earth. And that's what David did. He wanted to take away any negativity out of heaven and heaven on earth. But the idea is that this is for reasons that we don't always understand why bad things happen to good people. That's why I said it's very enigmatic, this particular heaven. The last one is called Aravot. And this is the highest heaven. And this is full, now all of them, except this last one, which ultimately we believe that all things come from God. And Gam Zula Tova, this is also for the good. And like Rabbi Akiva says, everything that God does is good. As I said, this is sometimes challenging for us when faced directly, or we read about, or people close to us are experiencing very heavy things, negative things, sometimes traumatic things. Nonetheless, there is a belief that ultimately everything is from the good, even from the sixth heaven. The seventh heaven is just all good. But I meant to say that if we saw all the other ones, God is renewing the works of creation. The sun and the moon and all of the stars, which bring so much light and joy to our lives. The pool of brachas, the upper Jerusalem, angels singing. all of these are so positive. And the last one is where righteousness, justice, charity, life, peace, blessing, souls of the righteous, and the dew that will be used for the resurrection of the dead are all stored there. And as I said, so much of our spiritual avoda, our work, our service of God is to bring heaven down to earth so that God will have a place to dwell with us in this world. So this was our overview of the number 7 as it appears in Shabbat, in the holidays, in ritual, in weddings, in cycles of purity, in groupings of people and events and entities, and in mitzvot as well. As I said, we probably left out a good number, but I hope this will give us an idea. And I'll end with the idea of what the sages said. We mentioned it in the first class. Kol shvi'in chavivin. All 7s are precious. And we see this in the Torah. This is a teaching from God. Going back to the first Shabbat, the first 7th day, God was establishing that the cycles of 7, as they relate to everything we just talked about, is something special, something precious, something important. And God is revealing this great secret that in time and space and consciousness, this idea of 7 appears over and over and over again. And so my blessing is that we all delve deeper into seeing the connections between all of these 7s, and especially that we learn to live our lives in tune with these cycles of 7.